Producer, sir.
Hey folks, welcome to the DarkHorse podcast live stream where anything can happen, including lint on your shirt, which is not podcast certified and therefore may collect more lint than would be ideal.
Indeed.
It is DarkHorse live stream 133.
Indeed.
Which, though it seems prime, is not on account of 19 and 7 having been invented. Am I right about that?
Invented?
Had they not been...
19 and 7 were invented in the same way that sex is assigned at birth.
So by an obstetrician? That was pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Which is to say, neither invented nor assigned.
Discovered?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do we know who discovered them? We don't need to. If we do, I want to be complete about it.
Do you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, we do not. We do not.
Okay, then it is not. Well done. Mm-hmm. Yes, that you can establish that pretty much. We don't know that you're telling the truth, but we know that you, at least in principle, might know that you don't know, and that's how we got here. Welcome to the rest of you, and I am Dr. Bret Weinstein. This is Dr. Heather Hying. Rhymes with flying.
Still does.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Always. All right. We have stuff to do. Is it Wednesday?
It is Wednesday. We are here in the middle of the week because neither last Saturday nor next Saturday are we able to be right here in these seats. So we will be coming to you next in, what would that be? 10 days. 10 days from now, we'll be back with Livestream 134. But right now we're here. We won't be doing a Q&A today, but we will be talking to you a little bit about Jordan Peterson and Twitter. We'll be talking about a new preprint about the efficacy and safety of the vaccines, the mRNA vaccines. And
what efficacy and safety?
Well, that is in part the point. We will be talking about trends that we are seeing anecdotally, but seeing no reporting on more generally in COVID cases. And I also wanted to talk just a little bit about some observations I made this week following a line from a book that I am reading that is quite remarkable, on which more later. So first, though, logistics.
Yes.
Logistics and sponsors and gratitude and all of that. We are, as ever, grateful to all of you who are here for your sharing, for your engaging, for your remarkable communications to us. And we are sorry that we can respond to so few of them, but we run into people and hear from people so very often that we are having conversations that people tune into, in part because it is one of the few places that they can actually hear people talking with honesty and integrity in ways that sound like how they would like to be able to be talking with their own family and friends. And so that is what we're trying to do here.
Yes, there are a huge number of you out there, and you don't all agree, which is evident in our conversations, right. But you all agree on something higher than the particulars. You agree on the desirability of figuring out what is going on and being open about it and courageous and all that. So
that's right. There are certainly a number of liberals in our audience, like us, who don't abide by the new woke so-called progressivism, and a number of conservatives. Some of whom we disagree with on the sort of traditional basis of disagreement with conservatives versus liberals. Some of which we don't, some of whom we don't, and there's all sorts of lines being crossed, being destroyed, being unimportant anymore in light of the revealed, but has always been important, nature of actually conversation and coming together over our shared humanity and frankly our shared fate on this planet.
On this tiny little planet.
Tiny, little, gorgeous, somewhat fragile, feistier than you might imagine, but boy do we have some tools, us, humanity, with which we might destroy a lot that we should not be destroying if we're not careful.
Yeah, I thought you were going to invoke the other tools, the tools with which we might rescue ourselves by bootstrapping a new way. But
no, I was thinking about things like fracking.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Although, as many will point out, fracking is a double-edged sword, right? Mm-hmm. You got to talk about the cost of it, which is very substantial and real, and the cost of not doing it because you don't have access to that energy source. So anyway, it's a net calculation.
Of course, everything is,
yep.
But we are doing great damage in places where we do have choices. and where incentives have been aligned so as to make it seem like we have fewer choices than we actually do.
Yes, constraining us to make choices that somebody else wants us to make,
Indeed.
Even though it's not in our interest.
Indeed. So we have, of course, still and always our book that we encourage you to go find and read, A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, which is now out in Spanish and French as well, and will soon be out in a number of other languages. We have the chat going on right now if you're watching live at Odysee. And of course, if you are watching later, you can watch on Spotify. You can listen on any place where podcasts are available. We have, as of like this morning, a new store. And it is still in progress. It is still very much a work in progress. But Zach, if you want to share just the home screen of the new store, that would be delightful. Still there, Zach?
Yes, I'm doing it.
Awesome.
It's a new store, and I should say, in the parlance of the late 80s, early 90s, it's a much more bitchin' store.
Is it?
I believe it is. I believe it has many desirable characteristics, upgraded merch, greater diversity. It's an awesome store, and
higher quality too. So we're not going to show you around here, but we encourage you to do so. And like we said, it's still very much in beta, if you will. But we have here, for instance, the Tour de France shirt, which we rolled out on Teespring a couple weeks ago, and then the Teespring store promptly went down for presumably unrelated reasons. But here it is, better print quality. Better, more choices in terms of where you might want to put it. It reads. What is the line on the shirt?
The Tour de France. It's like bike racing on steroids.
Yeah.
I must say, I have wanted to put that on a shirt for many, many years, and suddenly, what do you know? We have the ability to put things on shirts.
Suddenly, you have the option, and there's also a couple of shirts.
Comes with great art too. I did not have the art in mind, but we have a marvelous artist who
we work with. Yes, so he's fabulous. Also, we have the YouTube shirt that was that Teespring took down, but because it is it that it's irony? Is that why we're allowed to?
Oh no, I don't think irony would do it, but satire protects you.
Satire
is clearly satire.
So,
though I don't think YouTube will take it that way.
No, of course not.
No.
And what does it say?
It says YouTube community guidelines because you can't handle the truth.
Indeed. And then the final piece of merch up there, and we've got there's backpacks, there's all sorts of good stuff up there now. There's now embroidered caps. The final one that we actually maybe never even released or we thought about, but now it's up, is the...
Oh, you're going to want one of these, especially after this week's show.
Mm-hmm.
It is... can we show it? Zach, are you able to access it? Yeah, if you can.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know which is... Oh, it's either.
Yeah, you probably do. Yeah. So we'll just sort of...
Yeah, okay. If you can show it, that's awesome. So this is a shirt... wow, that's a tote bag. Inspired by the above and beyond performance of Pfizer.
Mm-hmm. Pfizer. The breakthroughs never stop.
Yep, we said it.
Yep, we did.
Right,
we did. And maybe actually my favorite thing on the new store, which is not dangerous, is the Epic Tabby tote bag.
Oh, it's dangerous, but at a very much
at the point that we
scale.
have one of them, we will show you the Epic Tabby tote bag with an Epic Tabby in it. The very Epic Tabby on which the art was designed.
And hey,
which you modeled.
Here's the thing: we are as always working without a net. You and I are both trained ethologists.
Mm-hmm. That's animal behaviorists, yes.
As trained animal behaviorists who know an awful lot about this individual animal, you and I have both separately predicted that he is going to like being in the tote bag.
Absolutely.
Even though many cats would not.
No.
So we'll see. We'll see if we've got that one right, if we've understood the mind of the creature in question.
I think you will like it in all of the orientations.
Mm-hmm.
I think you will like it if we leave it open on its side, as most cats would.
Oh, sure.
I think you will leap into it if we leave it sitting open and upright, as some cats would. I think he will even like to be carried around in it, as most cats would not.
I think he will enjoy being swung gently, and then released, and that he will return for more. That's my prediction.
Yes, and that is part of what makes him so epic.
Yes,
indeed. Okay, so do go check out the store. We're very excited about it, and thrilled to be working with the people at Squid Print who made the store and are doing all the work behind the scenes.
I love that name too, because you have to you have to make the connection. But once you do, I mean, of course, squid print.
Obviously. Yeah, ink it up. Okay, go check out my natural selections, my Substack. This week I talked a little bit about just a little vignette from a flower shop that I had, in which a woman invited me into her decision making about which bouquet to buy, and acknowledged when I asked her directly if the house guests who were coming for whom she was buying the bouquet were dear to her.
She had a flower shop?
What did I say?
You dangled a modifier, and it sounded like you had a flower shop that I didn't know about. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but I'm pretty sure you didn't mean that.
I'm not sure what I didn't mean now. That
you have a flower shop that I'm unaware of.
Vignette.
Right, a vignette.
I believe I said vignette.
You did.
Okay, moving on. Never mind then. So we are supported by our audience. We are, as we already said, we appreciate you subscribing and liking and sharing. And we've got the clips channels and the main channels, and YouTube has demonetized us, as we've said. So we appreciate any and all support that you can send our way. One of those is through our Patreons, where we have an active Discord community that is just terrific. Apparently, we don't actually spend time there, but we're thinking of starting to. And
it is a concordant Discord community, as they all should be, but ours definitely is.
And what does that mean?
It means that they are communal and they look out for each other, and Discord suggests some battle and all. It does. That's true. Yes, yeah. It does. Can we go back can we get the vignette? Is it possible? I could apologize to you for stepping on your story and.
No, it's in the Substack. If you're interested, you should go there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. The little point that I was making there, which I'm not going to go back. So as the Discord people told us, you can engage in honest conversations about difficult topics, join a book club, even unwind with virtual happy hours and karaoke. Young or old, left or right, there's a spot for you around the campfire at the Discord, which you can access by joining either of our Patreons. And of course, we have sponsors to whom we are quite grateful. And we actually really do, we are very choosy about who we let into sponsoring DarkHorse. So without further ado, here we go. 3 of them this week, as usual. All right. Our first sponsor today is new to us. It's Element. That's LMNT, Element. Element is an electrolyte drink mix that has everything you need and nothing you don't. It's got a lot of salts. 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, 600 milligrams of magnesium. But it has no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, and no fillers. Electrolytes, as many of you will know, facilitate hundreds of functions in the body, including the conduction of nerve impulses, hormonal regulation, and nutrient absorption. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, and sleeplessness. I've now heard from several friends, independently of one another, about how much they like Element for themselves, or in some cases, for the physically hardworking men in their lives. They drink it every day and feel better doing so. When you sweat, the primary electrolyte loss is sodium. Athletes can lose up to 7 grams per day. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto or low-carb or paleo diet as well. It's not just for athletes, though. Element is useful for anyone being active. Even drinking a few glasses of wine can leave you depleted, and Element can help. Right now, Element is offering our listeners a free sample pack with any purchase, and they've got a tremendous number of very interesting flavors. That's 8 single-serving packets free with any Element order. This is a great way to try all 8 flavors or share Element with a salty friend. Get yours at drinkelement.com/darkhorse. This deal is only available through our link. You must go to drinklmnt.com/darkhorse. Element offers no questions when you ask for a refund. Element offers no questions asked refunds. That's how that reads. Try it totally risk-free. If you don't like it, share it with a salty friend, and they will give you your money back, no questions asked. You have nothing to lose. All right. Our second sponsor today is Public Goods. Public Goods was one of our very first sponsors in 2021, and we are as pleased with them now as when we first tried their products. Public Goods can simplify your life. They're a one-stop shop for everyday essentials. Their ingredients are carefully sourced, high quality, and affordable. Public Goods has coffee and tea, grains and oils like olive and avocado. They've got Castile soap and trash bags and laundry detergent. They have spices and extracts like vanilla and almond, vinegars and pastas, dishware and glassware. There is so much at Public Goods to make a meal, including the materials to serve it on. Public Goods searches the globe to find clean, healthy, eco-friendly, and innovative products. They care about health and sustainability. Public Goods products are largely free of harmful ingredients and additives, and the ingredients are ethically sourced. So rather than buying from a bunch of single product brands, Public Goods members can buy all their premium essentials in one place with one beautiful, simple, streamlined aesthetic. Their subscription service is efficient and easy to use. Public Goods members can buy all of their premium essentials in one place, so it can become your everything store. For DarkHorse listeners, we have the following offer. Receive $15 off your first Public Goods order with no minimum purchase. They are so confident that you will absolutely love their products and come back again and again that they are giving you $15 to spend on your first purchase. Go to publicgoods.com/darkhorse or use code DarkHorse at checkout. That is publicgoods.com/darkhorse to receive $15 off your first order.
All right. Our final sponsor this week is 8 Sleep. Good sleep is a game changer. As we discuss in the sleep chapter of A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide, intelligent life that found its way to Earth might be surprised by a lot of what it found on our planet, but likely not by the fact of sleep or dreams. Sleep is necessary. Without good sleep, we are destined to be unhealthy and unproductive. Yet more than 30% of Americans struggle with sleep, and temperature is one of the main reasons. It's well known that individuals in couples who sleep together often have different optimal sleep temperatures.
Boy, do we.
You can say that again. 8 Sleep allows fine-tuned temperature regulation for both people. Having a cool room and a warm bed is a luxury that 8 Sleep makes easy to obtain.
Or you could have a cool room and a cool bed, as some people like.
I was going to ad-lib that in there, but I thought I might trip over it. But you're right. The Pod Pro cover by 8 Sleep is the most advanced solution on the market for thermoregulation. You can add the cover to any mattress and start sleeping as cool as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as hot as 110. Yikes! We don't recommend either extreme, but your mileage may vary. The temperature of the cover will adjust each side of the bed based on your sleep stages, biometrics, and bedroom temperature, reacting dynamically to create the optimal sleep environment. And I will point out, if you have a bedroom that faces east and warms up in the summer before you're ready to get up, you can turn it to cool that thing down.
Yeah.
8 Sleep users fall asleep 32% faster, reduce sleep interruptions by 40%, and get more restful sleep overall, and with 30% more deep sleep on average. That restorative sleep will likely help you with physical recovery, hormone regulation, and mental clarity. Finally, the alarm feature, which can wake you with temperature change and/or slight chest-level vibrations, is so much gentler than any standard alarm. We were both a little skeptical, and now we are totally sold. We are surprised at how much we appreciate this bed. Go to 8sleep.com/darkhorse to check out the Pod Pro cover and save $150 at checkout. 8 Sleep ships to the USA, Canada, and the UK. 8sleep.com/darkhorse.
Excellent. All right. Now then, you wanted to start by talking a little bit about what we are seeing anecdotally, lacking any systematic data on account of no one appears to be collecting it, or if they are reporting on it with regard to COVID.
Waves of COVID, yes. So it does seem that somehow the public mind is not capable of juggling as many objects at once as it might need to deal with modernity. And one of the things that seems to have slipped off the radar is the fact that somehow this pandemic continues to ebb and flow, and we have moved on to Ukraine and inflation and all sorts of other questions. As you point out, you and I in our social circle have seen an obvious wave of COVID. Now, obviously, one social circle could be way off, but the number of people that we've had report COVID in the last several weeks, I would say, is alarming in light of how rare it was a month and a half ago, let's say. So, anecdotally speaking, there seems to be a wave. There also seems to be a change in the way COVID is behaving. Several things are evident, both from anecdote and a certain amount of exploration, scientifically speaking. So one thing that we are seeing is the possibility that COVID is moving lower in the lungs. And one thing that you and I have seen in our anecdotal pool is that little kids are getting hit. And they're not getting hit with something very, very minor. They're getting hit with something that is not life-threatening, but is definitely debilitating for days.
Yeah. What is the evidence that it's going lower and lower in the lungs?
Zach actually...
He's getting me water.
Getting ice. Well, okay. It is referenced in an article from...
Hydrated.
Yeah, it is important. Hydration is important.
Yeah. I didn't end up with any water, so...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, boy. I see.
No worries.
In any case... There is evidence that it's moving lower in the lung. Of course, all of these things are difficult to ascertain because of the noise in the data, right? In other words, we have different variants. There's a question of which variants get a name, whether or not if you're seeing an anecdotal wave of a particular variant and you're seeing disease lower in the lung, if the two things are the same, that requires an awful lot of work of sequencing to figure out whether a particular variant is causing that.
Right, but that all presumes that there's data at all. Like I just haven't seen anything suggesting lower in the lungs.
There is some. What I will say is, the reason I wanted to call attention to this is that the possibility that the disease is moving lower in the lungs, the apparent pattern of it moving in the direction of young, healthy children, has an ominous ring to it, because these are predictions of Gerrit Vanden Bossche, and he has predicted other things which we have yet to see, but should they unfold...
So let's just be precise. Gerrit predicted increased virulence in the wake of mass vaccinating with a leaky vaccine during a pandemic, and the lower in the lungs is what you were taking as evidence of mass virulence, or did he specifically suggest that we were going to start to see it infecting lower in the lungs?
He has specifically suggested that possibility.
Lower in the lungs.
Yes.
Okay.
And more severe disease. So both more infectiousness and more virulence. And the lower in the lungs is a matter of greater virulence. I don't know whether we're seeing
Thank you.
An increased death toll, obviously, or death toll per case. But the fact that we are seeing multiple predictions from a model tells us something about what we're supposed to do, right? Any model that successfully predicts that which other models cannot should be taken seriously, right? Now, it's possible to get one or maybe even two predictions right by luck. Right. But the more of these predictions that manifest themselves, the greater the likelihood that the model that generated those predictions overlaps reality in some important way. And I would also point out that there is an added, more subtle implication here, which is because we are at the beginning of the summer and seeing these patterns, this virus, which was thought likely to be seasonal. I must say I doubted the seasonality of it at first because of its likely laboratory origin. But it is likely to be seasonal, even if the virus itself is indifferent to season. Our behavior as human beings is not indifferent to season. Our exposure to vitamin D, our likelihood to be found outside, these are all important facts. And so the fact that we are seeing a major wave, while the weather is good here in the northern hemisphere, says one very ominous thing, which is that were the weather bad and we corralled indoors and not being exposed to vitamin D, this might be much, much worse, and therefore the disease itself may be that much more virulent and is partially being kept at bay by the weather. What does that mean for what's coming in the winter? That's more complex, because we are seeing this wave, and it is possible that it will generate enough natural immunity that by the time the weather corrals us and starts limiting people's production of vitamin D, we will have gotten a substantial fraction of the way to herd immunity, at least to these variants. And so one does not want to predict, well, winter's going to be worse, because if it's sufficiently aggressive now at transmission, that will reduce transmission down the road. And so it's possible that it's summer transmission, although it means something ominous about the underlying viral evolution, is a lucky break, because now is when you would prefer to have it circulate so that people are better prepared and less likely to transmit it. When they do have lower viral concentration.
Lower viral concentration.
When they get it, they will have gotten it with a lower exposure and be less sick.
Now,
yes,
because
they tend to
they're more likely to be outside. I now lost my train of thought with regard to what I was going to say in response to you. That all seems quite possible. I don't know what's going on in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, I don't either. And part of the problem with having a completely unreliable news environment, a journalistic environment that doesn't work, is that it's we're not seeing it properly reported in the Northern Hemisphere. And so nobody is inspired to say, well, what is going on in the global South and what does it imply? And so, we're forced to, to read something closer to tea leaves, and to work from anecdote, which is unfortunate. It's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. I guess, we don't have certainty around what makes some illnesses seasonal. Although the hypothesis that has been put forward that seems to have the most support for things like flu and cold are that it is about the length of the days and the warmth of the days, the two obvious contributing factors to health being the more likely you are to be outside in the warmth means that you will be generating more vitamin D, and also the melatonin that we had talked about many weeks ago, and also that you are just more likely to be outside in spaces where it's going to be harder to get infected because you're in, as you just said, smaller volume spaces in the winter, larger volume spaces, which is to say usually the outside in the summer. This may be wave. This is a very hard thing to talk about because we don't have data. We only have anecdote, and it does seem like in the last 2 weeks we're seeing this increase. And in one way, at the astronomical level, we're exactly at the beginning of the summer because we now call summer between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. But that isn't always how people have understood what summer is, of course. Midsummer's Night Dream from Shakespeare has midsummer as the longest day of the year, the shortest night of the year, which of course is the solstice. And that is also consistent with, while it will tend to be warmer in July and August in many places than May, the days are longest in June and the first half of July. So you might expect regional differences to the degree that this virus is in fact has been seasonal and is moving aseasonal. That here in the Pacific Northwest, for instance, really our summer is just getting started. And it's once again very cool and drippy here, but boy, our August's perfect. And really September's are as well. Whereas for many people in many parts of at least the United States, by middle of May, it feels like full summer. Everything is growing. Everything is verdant. When we lived in Michigan, certainly that was the case. The universities ended by end of April because historically, the growing season was such that you just needed to be, if this was your work, you needed to be on the farm. For beginning really before April, but certainly for full time May, June, July, August, and the substantial differences in heat profile, in seasonality, and what's growing when, and in therefore when people are most likely to be outside, should be expected to affect therefore when the seasonal viruses, and whether or not this one still is the question, will be most rampant for people.
All right, several points. One, there are two factors in seasonality potentially. Mm-hmm. One is the virus evolving to take advantage of opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So there can be things inscribed in the genome of a virus that might predispose it to play games that work better in one season or another.
So for instance, just to work better at a particular temperature.
Yeah,
be more effective, like be more transmissible outside a body at a particular temperature.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Or more tolerant of existing on a surface, and that you might not be likely to encounter outdoors. Anyway, there are lots of ways it could evolve that would provide a bias, and then there are ways in which a virus that was completely indifferent to the information about what season it was would still appear to behave seasonally because of our shift in behavior, which is radical. Yep. So those are worth separating. Second thing I wanted to say, I think I forgot to mention that in our anecdotal sample, I will say there is a strong but not absolute bias towards people who are at least somewhat vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccines.
That's true. We
have seen some people who are not vaccinated, but the number of people who have been hit with substantial disease who are vaccinated is conspicuous. Yeah. Which raises questions, which I guess we'll get to later in the podcast, about efficacy of the vaccines, and also possible downsides. right? Which were never properly accounted for in the fairy tale that we were given about how these things were supposed to function. The risk that they would be counterproductive was never described.
It wasn't, and maybe that's a good place to segue here. But one thing that is always worth saying is that specifically the mRNA vaccines, but I guess also the adenovirus vectored vaccines, the effects of them on the body are likely to be very similar to the effects of the virus itself, because of course, to the degree that the disease, that COVID, as produced by SARS-CoV-2, is largely about the spike protein. What the mRNA vaccines are doing is getting your body to produce the spike protein over and over and over and over again. So it can be hard to tell the difference. And is there a chance that having been exposed to the spike via a vaccine, upon being exposed to the actual complete virus, you are more likely to have a response at this point? Of course, it's possible.
I want to add two things here, a couple things. One is, I think the better way to do this is not to say that the two things are very similar. It's to say that there is a subset of the effects of the virus and the vaccines. Mm-hmm. There is a subset of the effects of these things that overlaps.
Yes.
That is that which there turns out spike protein is a problem in and of itself.
Right.
To the extent that both the virus and the vaccines produce spike protein, there will be an overlap in whatever counterproductive physiology follows from that. Then there are a lot of things that are not overlapping, right? For example, you would expect that which is caused by lipid nanoparticles to accompany the mRNA vaccines, but not COVID or the DNA-based adenovectored vaccines, etc. So there are lots of subsets, some big Venn diagram of stuff. But the other thing, and I must tell you, I found Jonathan Cooey's recent podcast with I'm stumbling to find his Twitter handle. Anyway, I'll come back to it in a second. But Jonathan Cooey's recent podcast explored at a level of technical detail that was very hard to follow. I think even he had trouble following elements of it, but explored some of the massive differences between the likely differences that are downstream of the way these vaccines induce the production of spike that suggest that what is circulating in vaccinated people is not entirely spike protein based on the
instructions from the mRNA
model, right? That basically, essentially, the pseudouridines that were introduced. So pseudouridine is something that does occur naturally. Nature uses this mechanism, but it uses it very, very sparingly, and we have almost no understanding of what it does and why it shows up where it is. The manufacturers that basically turned your cells into a vaccine factory used it universally. They replaced all the uracils, right? And what I learned from this podcast that I did not know is that the ribosomes are not indifferent to it, that actually neither the ribosomes nor the tRNAs deal with this as a uracil. What happens is effectively an unpredictable phenomenon where there are lots of errors introduced every time, because the ribosome is built around hitting a uracil and reading the information this way. A pseudouridine has a very different effect. And so
I have not seen this podcast with J.J. Cooey, but it sounds like in your Venn diagram of the ways that the vaccines could cause health problems and the ways that COVID cause health problems, there's this Venn diagram, as you said, and the spike protein effects. The effects from the spike protein are not entirely overlapping, in part because there's additional spike protein with pseudouridine, spike protein created by pseudouridine mRNA effects that will not be found in the original COVID, which is itself, of course, a Frankenvirus, but we've now got like a Franken vaccine for a Frankenvirus, and therefore not even the spike protein is exactly the same.
Right, and what's more, again, this is not my area of expertise, but our vaccinologist friends and others with more of a molecular focus will correct me if I'm wrong here, but this also makes an argument in favor of the DNA-based vaccines, because the DNA vaccines will not have pseudouridine in the RNA that results in encoding of the spike proteins.
That's right.
So anyway,
because there's no uracil in DNA.
Right. So the point is, at the point you get to RNA, it's a normal RNA because the mechanism is different. So if I've got that wrong, somebody will tell me, but certainly can't see how it would be wrong. I wanted to add one more thing. The question, one of the questions you and I used to pose to students was, why isn't the solstice the center of the summer from a weather perspective? In other words, why is there this lag in the warm temperatures?
Why, as things seem like they're getting wonderfully warm and beautiful to spend time outside, at least in some parts of the country, it really doesn't begin until like early mid-July, are the days already shortening?
Right. And so anyway, I just wanted to put a little bit of an answer here, which has to do with the way, were it all about incident energy, yes, that is what you would have. But because it is about the accumulation of the heat in the ground and the water and the plants.
You've got thermal mass
in
the water and the ground.
Which causes a lag. And, you can see the same thing in the day, right?
Well, and you feel it. So, if you... Probably almost everyone watching or listening has been in a home that has been heated with air, like central heat or blowing air. And some people may have been in homes that have been heated by radiant heat, wherein the mass of the objects is actually heated, usually floors or radiators. And it is that rather than the air itself, which is heated. And you can really feel a difference when your thermostat, if you're in a forced air heated house, or a house that is heated by blowing air, by heating the air as opposed to the stuff. The thermostat can say 68, and you can either feel very, very warm or very, very cold. And of course, there are a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons will be, is the structure itself warm or cold? And if you are coming off of a summer, probably your whole structure is pretty warm, and 68 may actually feel a little warm for you. And if you're coming off the winter, 68 may feel, depending on what all of your proclivities are, a little cool, because although the air temperature may be 68, if all the surfaces you're touching are cooler than that, and if they're basically sucking heat into them as opposed to emanating heat, it's going to feel cooler to you.
I agree with that, except I would adjust the model a little bit. It's one thing when your floor is warm, right? You are warming a thermal mass, and depending upon what your floor is made of, that will have various implications. But the point is, you never really get very much heat to the ceiling and to the high parts of the walls, right? So it'll be a very stratified heat, whereas if you heat with air, it's inefficient, but you do end up heating all of those surfaces, including the ceiling and things.
Well, but the hot air rises more quickly than that dissipates, so that you end up with less of what you need, because more of the heating is above the level of your head.
Well, it's of course complex because it heats the floor above, and so
if you're in a 2-story home.
Yep. And so anyway, there's a lot going on, but it's the interplay between these things that, a home in which the surfaces are not heated cools down very quickly, for example. And anyway, it varies a lot by building and how you construct it.
Sure. But also my point is by seasonality.
Yep.
And that is part of why you start spending more time outside after everything around you, the earth, the water, the houses, the structures, have started heating up, because there's just been so much accumulated sun that the length of the days is long enough at the solstice and for the month either side of the solstice, that the night intervening is not sufficient to fully cool things down. So you get an accumulation of heat in the masses of things, and similarly you get a accumulation of cold, which isn't really a thing, but in the winter, right? It's just harder and harder with each passing day, as the nights get longer and longer and the days get shorter and shorter, to recoup any of the energy that you lose during the long, ever colder nights.
Yep.
All right. So speaking of COVID, there is yet another paper, this one published in a mainstream place. It's still in preprint. It's not published. It hasn't even been peer reviewed, but by a reputable mainstream academic, suggesting that, suggesting that the COVID vaccines are doing more harm than good. So you can show my screen here, Zach. This is serious adverse events. It is though. So as soon as possible, my screen is going to be shown here. It's called Serious Adverse Events of Special Interest Following mRNA Vaccination in Randomized Trials. The communicating author is Peter Doshi, who, boy, I think is editor. I've forgotten now. I don't have it in my notes that are on screen right now. At, I want to say the British Medical Journal, although I'm not positive about that. Are we live yet, Zach?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So don't go live on me yet, okay? I need to go back and look at something. I don't have it here. Well, I'm just going to abstract, and hopefully this comes up on the screen soon. So the results of this paper read. The results in the abstract, which is the summary written by the authors of the paper, of the research they have done. Pfizer and Moderna mRNA COVID-19 vaccines were associated with an increased risk of serious adverse events of special interest, with an absolute risk increase of 10.1 and 15.1 per 10,000 vaccinated over placebo baselines of 17.6 and 42.2. 95% confidence interval, etc., etc. Combined, the mRNA vaccines were associated with an absolute risk increase of serious adverse events of special interest of 12.5 per 10,000. 95% confidence interval 2.1 to 22.9. The excess risk of serious adverse events of special interest surpassed the risk reduction for COVID-19 hospitalization relative to the placebo group in both Pfizer and Moderna trials, 2.3 and 6.4 per 10,000 participants, respectively. So in plain English, what they found by going and looking at the data in that Pfizer and Moderna finally released is that the risks from these vaccines, the risks of serious adverse events, and they describe how those are defined, and they're defined pretty carefully and very much the same between Pfizer and Moderna. The incidence of serious adverse events is higher than the benefits from the vaccines as measured by reduced hospitalizations. That is consistent with all sorts of things that we're seeing, of course. This is a paper that is due to be published in a major journal by a lot of big names who are, have not been deplatformed, have not been canceled for saying such things. And what this, I guess I'm thrown a little bit because can you take the screen off of me directly, Bret, Zach? Oh my goodness. Okay, do you want to show my screen then? Okay, let's just quickly show the paper if you can. Okay, so this is the paper. You can see they put in big gray print across the back, preprint, not peer reviewed. But as we've talked about before, you've got 7 authors on here who are effectively each other's peers who are peer reviewing it, and lots of other people who know what they're doing who have peer reviewed this effectively. But because most people who aren't scientists hear peer review as the sine qua non of what it means in good science, the fact that it's not peer reviewed is going to be used to dismiss it. And the fact is,
The audio just
You unable to hear us? All right, we're going to reboot the audio. Talking.
All right.
All right, we are back.
So
Sorry about that.
Apologies. Tech problems all over the place. So this paper is a new take on somewhat old data. It says much the same thing that many people have been saying in slightly different form. There has been, as far as I've seen, not a peep in the mainstream media about it. I saw it, I don't remember how originally, but then I also saw it covered in Phil Harper's Substack. And this
Robert
is
Malone as well.
Okay, Robert Malone also talked about it. And, it's the same as the usual suspects. including us, talking about these things over and over and over again. And one has to wonder why? What is going on? So sort of simultaneous with this being out recently, we have, Zach, if you would show the first, I'm going to ask you to show the three things that I sent to you. We've got first in Washington State.
Wait. Can we go back and say a thing or two about this paper if we're going to move on?
Well, this is all connected, but sure.
One thing I want to say is that inherent to what this paper presents is a conservatism about the conclusion, right? Really, the conclusion is already the cost of those vaccinations exceeds the benefit. The likelihood, so because they define serious adverse events, the likelihood that there's subclinical stuff that has been caused by these vaccinations, but that has not unfolded in a serious event yet, things that could remove decades from people's lives, right? Those things are very likely to make the picture much, much worse the longer the time period over which you evaluate them. And so effectively, this paper is saying, within a year, we have already reached a level of adverse events that exceeds any benefit we've seen. The chances that the benefit...
Well, and actually, I think it was Pfizer who only tracked it for a month after. One of them, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was Pfizer that actually didn't even track for the whole year. They just tracked for a month after the second dose of the vaccination, I think.
Right. In any case, the point is, over a short period of time, the amount of harm done by the vaccines is already exceeding the benefit done. But because we know the benefit declines and the harm, we don't know what it does long term, but the chances that it does serious harm and then none is very, very low.
Yep.
So the point is, the picture is likely to be much worse than they present.
Absolutely. So your point, I didn't understand what you meant at first by conservative here. It is important. It is important for scientists to convey a conservative interpretation of their own results, so that even if they think they're seeing something extremely strong, they stay within the conservative bounds of what it might mean, which increases the chances that what they're saying is true, although it may well undersell, underdescribe what is actually true. And so there are at least I guess you've described maybe three ways that these results here are likely to be conservative. That the benefits of the vaccines decline over time, the costs of the vaccines will increase over time, and therefore a short time period of measurement will appear to make the benefits be higher than they actually are, and also appear to underweigh the costs. And then you also have, what was the third one? Can't remember at the moment what the third way that it was conservative.
Well, it's conservative in multiple ways. I think one we didn't mention was that were you to do an all-cause mortality over a very long period of time, you would catch lots of little harms that don't show up in particular adverse events.
Yeah, and actually that's related to the one I had in my head, which I think you did allude to before, which is that they have specified, in order to be very careful, in order to make it maximally quantitative, serious adverse events. And that means that anything that is not designated as serious, or anything that is subclinical in any way, or indeed, again, this is related to the first points, anything that has a delayed effect is unlikely to be captured here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will also point out that those of us in the heterodox scientific and medical community are very concerned about the degree to which the aggressiveness of this campaign and the focus on vaccinating everybody, irrespective of whether or not their particular jeopardy suggested it might be of value to them, has the collateral effect of making it very hard to figure out how much harm was done by the vaccines, because it makes the control group that much smaller and harder to identify, right?
And that's related to where I was about to go.
Okay.
So in Washington State, Zach, if you want to show that first link, Governor Inslee is mandating, that's really tiny, mandating vaccines for state employees. And this is a story on the Washington State governor's site, July 1st. Governor Jay Inslee has directed his cabinet agencies to implement policies to require their employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The Office of Financial Management will begin the process of rulemaking and engage in bargaining with labor. New mandates in July of 2022, when the evidence is abundant and ever growing that these vaccines are not what was promised and are are indeed, as the preprint that we were just discussing suggests, are doing more harm than good. Okay, next link I sent you, Zach.
So wait. Can I
yes,
pause and suggest something here?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of practicality, right? We are getting a number of different signals on a number of different channels that suggest something that you and I intuited up front at the beginning of all of this vaccine stuff, before there was any evidence, which was that the DNA-based vaccines were likely to be much safer for various reasons. And so the fact is, if you are in a position where you are being forced to take one of these vaccines, right, you may have a very difficult choice to make. But if you were to go with one of the DNA-based vaccines, the Ben article that we discussed several weeks back suggested that the DNA-based vaccines actually, at least so far, show some benefit, not all of which comes from COVID. So there's a mystery about why they might have a positive effect, and that could certainly reverse.
Did you say Ben?
Christine Ben was the author.
Okay.
But we have that piece of evidence. We have what I believe is going to turn out to be correct, which is that the pseudouridine problem will not afflict the mRNAs that result in spike protein. And so anyway, a person, and you have just the simple fact that each of the vaccination incidents seems to carry some separate risk. And so a vaccine that requires one dose rather than two has a benefit there as well. So we are not giving medical advice, but were we faced with a difficult choice, and we understand that many people were, choosing between vaccines, so far we've seen several independent reasons to think that probably what risks exist are reduced in the case of those.
Yep. And in Canada, Zachary, we are told 2 doses are no longer enough. This is in the Toronto Sun on July 4th. Canadians now required to get COVID shot every 9 months. That sounds like quite a vaccine we got going there. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos told reporters. So the Toronto Sun says, if you thought you were fully vaccinated, think again. Oh, you guys are not seeing the screen anymore. Now we can move on. And then finally, in this little, this little trio of, okay, Governor Inslee in Washington State says actually all state employees with some limitations need to be vaccinated. Canada is saying actually you got to get boosters every 9 months. And Elmo is on it as well. So Zach, if you want to show Elmo from Sesame Street talking about his vaccination status, let's do this. Yes, we do. It's the video that we want to show.
All right. Well, background information on Elmo.
He's red.
I was going to ask you, because although he seems red to me,
and you can see from that little screenshot that's actually showed us, his dad is also red, suggesting higher certainty of paternity than you might have otherwise thought.
We don't actually know the range of colors within whatever subspecies of Muppet Elmo might be.
Oh, you think? I thought all the Muppets can't interbreed?
I don't. I mean, I guess if Kermit and Miss Piggy,
right? I mean, I feel like maybe it was just a tryst. I don't know. Maybe we didn't see any little frog pig babies.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we do not know. Yeah, and then there's of course Haldane's rule, the possibility that were they to have produced hybrid Muppet babies, that the one that was heterogametic would have been born still, would have been infertile or short-lived.
Oh boy, it's tough too with Kermit being a frog and all, and the incredibly high rate of polyploidy in frogs, and just how is that going to work with your genetic sex determination over here with mammals, and then you got a lot of crazy genetics going on.
This
with
is
the
worse
pig frog
than
mix.
It's worse than being star-crossed. It's being, I don't know, felt-crossed or something.
Felt-crossed.
Felt-crossed lovers.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that was a fine little Muppet mating genetics.
We successfully avoided dead air.
Goodness. You have the video to show our audience now, Zach? Excellent.
Now Daddy has super duper bandages just like Elmo. You were super duper today, getting your COVID vaccine, Elmo.
Yeah, there was a little pinch, but it was okay. Elmo was really glad to have Daddy and Baby David there with him. Baby David, where are you?
I had a lot of questions about Elmo getting the COVID vaccine. Was it safe? Was it the right decision? I talked to our pediatrician so I could make the right choice. I learned that Elmo getting vaccinated is the best way to keep himself, our friends, neighbors, and everyone else healthy and enjoying the things they love.
Oh, Daddy, Elmo and Baby David have a question. Can we have a hug?
Oh, come here, son.
Elmo loves you, Daddy.
I love you too.
It's okay to have questions about COVID vaccines
So,
for your
point one.
kids. Get the
Elmo's
latest
dad
facts
appears to
by
have a Van Dyke. Is that what those are called? Those little goatee things?
No, that's a goatee.
That's just a goatee.
That's just a goatee.
That's just a goatee.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's looking pretty hip. He's trying to get
He's hip.
the hip dads with their cute red kids and just explain to the kids, this is going to keep you safe. It's going to keep your family and friends safe. It's going to keep your community safe. If you just get one of these shots, which, don't pay any attention to the data behind the curtain. And the papers and the researchers who are actually finding that no, this doesn't stop transmission and it doesn't stop infection. And although lots of people like to respond once they're sick by saying, well, I'm sure glad I got the shot because if I hadn't, I sure would have been sicker now, on no basis whatsoever. Like, this seems to be the new, like, flying the Ukraine colors in your Twitter bio. Like, once you get COVID, you're expected to say, or a lot of high profile people say, at least I got boosted. At least I got vaccinated. Else I'd sure as shit be sicker with COVID right now. How do you know that?
Yeah.
It's not true. It has been said. It has been said by people who wear nice lab coats and look to be authoritative on the matter, but they've never shown us any evidence of this being true. We've got a lot of people proclaiming it to be true, which, by the way, is not how science works.
No, and it is particularly disturbing to hear this done via Elmo and to hear the particular nonsense about this is the best way to keep you, Elmo, safe and your community, et cetera, because there was never any implication from evidence that this made children who were healthy safer.
Right.
And so the idea is this was always about protecting people who were vulnerable by vaccinating children at unknown risk, right? Which was never acceptable. What sane, rational, decent society does such a thing? But we've done it without explaining that that's what we're doing. Now we've put this into a cute Muppet. And the whole point, the way the thing is structured, the whole idea is that the child watching their the cutest Muppet of all, declaring how proud he is and that his father did have questions, but they were all answered.
It's okay to have questions.
It's okay
as long as you come to the same answer we have told you to come to. Ask all the questions you want, but come to the right answer.
Right. If you come to a different answer, then you're right wing, right?
And those questions were always wrong.
Right. So the point is really manipulating. I mean, this is just like the ice cream stuff and all of the various tactics that were used to manipulate.
What's the ice cream stuff?
Well, they offered ice cream to kids for getting vaccinated and things like that. The point is manipulating children who are, of course, in need of protection from adults who wish to manipulate them for so many reasons. This is adults who are wrong, manipulating children so as to override the legitimate questions that their thinking parents might have. And the point is, it all ends up with the parent deciding to vaccinate the child who doesn't need it because he's a healthy young Muppet, you know? I
guarantee you Elmo didn't need it.
Elmo didn't need it.
Yeah.
No.
He's a Muppet.
He's a Muppet. The only basis on which Elmo could arguably
On the other hand, Elmo wasn't harmed by it either, on account of
he's a Muppet. Well, there's that, but I'm also thinking Elmo has got to be 30 or 40.
He's a pedomorphic Muppet.
Right. He is a pedomorphic. And we don't know
he's
how
a Muppet stuck in time as they
He's
all
a
are.
Muppet stuck in time. Okay. So anyway, the whole point is that how diabolical is this? That even at this point at which any rational person should be able to look at this and say, look, overall, safe? No. Effective? How crippled do you have to make that term before it applies to these most appallingly ineffective vaccines, right? You have to really bend that term. They have to be, it's effective at something, so go get it. What is that something? It's not at controlling the pandemic. right? It's not keeping you from giving it to your family or getting it from them. It's, at best, it's to keep vulnerable people out of the hospital, and they're giving it to people who aren't vulnerable.
Right.
It's insane.
So in light of all of this, I wanted to share a conversation that I had this week. I'm going to change enough details so as to fully anonymize the people, but it's two women who I've met before, and they will know that I'm talking about them, but they will also see that I have changed enough details that they will remain anonymous.
But your identity remains in the open in this conversation.
Yeah. So I'm walking one of the days that it was beautiful out this week, actually on the 4th of July, and I was going to see the parade, one of the parades that was happening here, and ran into these two lovely women. I actually don't know your guys' ages, but I think you're maybe a couple decades older than us, because you've got kids just little younger than us. These women are wide awake, they're liberal, and they are not buying the mainstream media nonsense. They are both vaccinated against COVID, both with J&J, and they have no intention of getting any boosters, although in one of their cases, their son said the reason that they got injected the first time was that their son said, actually, Ma, you can't see your grandkids unless you get a vaccine. And so she very reluctantly went and got the one that she perceived to be the safest one, the J&J. And she wishes she hadn't had to. And so the conversation I then had, when she's telling me this, is she says, I'm kind of an anti-vaxxer from way back. And I raised my eyebrows at her. I'm like, really? Why? She says, well, I never took the flu vaccine, for instance. And I said, well, okay, but the flu vaccine isn't really a vaccine. If you think about it, if we're defining vaccine really liberally, and these COVID vaccines are vaccines, the flu vaccine is vaccine, okay. But actually, they're kind of cheating when they're calling these things vaccines. And, anything with really rapidly fading efficacy, such that you need shots within a year, or, Canada's saying 9 months, is, as actually J.J. Couey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines, right?
I have not heard him say that about flu.
No, about the COVID vaccines.
Certainly.
Yes,
yep.
Yes, not about flu. So I said, okay, so a lot of people have been skeptical about getting the flu vaccine. So I don't think that makes you an anti-vaxxer. And she said, okay. So I was like, but you haven't gotten any vaccines? And she says, oh, I'm up to date on my tetanus shot. And she said, I got MMR, and when I travel, I always get the recommended vaccines like yellow fever. And I said, well, you're hardly an anti-vaxxer then. What you are is a Trad-vaxxer. A Trad-vaxxer. And I'm also a Trad-vaxxer. I think you're also a Trad-vaxxer. And Trad here obviously has implications over in like Trad-wife space. Trad-wife? Hell no. Neither of these women would abide by that name. I certainly don't. Hell no. Trad-vaxxer, referring to what vaccines originally were, the mechanism by which they work, the reason that they are effective in getting your immune system to become aware of something in a small way, such that if they become infected, if the body becomes exposed to the actual virus or whatever the pathogen is in a larger form, it has a head start on it. Yeah, absolutely. As we say in our book, vaccines, along with antibiotics and surgery, are the three things in Western medicine that Western medicine has the most to be proud of. But that doesn't mean that anything you slap the label on, vaccine, is necessarily a vaccine. And so these Trad-vaxxer, that's what she's not an anti-vaxxer. She's a Trad-vaxxer.
Yeah, I love the term Trad-vaxxer. I'm a little concerned that we're stuck in that it's not exact. The line that one might draw, if one had access to really good information on which vaccines are net valuable, I'm not sure that the line is, and I'm not sure how far back it has to be traditional.
Oh, and actually, I mean, this is something that I wrote out, but I'm not going to go into here. But exactly right, that there is no line, there's no timeline before which and after which everything was pure or not, right? We began to move away from, by virtue of a new platform, new mechanisms of action, what the early vaccinologists were doing very quickly. And that doesn't mean that some of those advances weren't promising, but many of them were dangerous in ways that, because they were incremental or because the public never was aware of them, we just accepted.
So I just want to introduce some of the necessary nuance here. One, just because something works by the traditional mechanism doesn't mean it's worth the risk, right?
True.
So you can have a
cholera, for instance. I believe
you already covered this one in a past week.
But I have not looked at it. I believe that cholera is a fairly traditional vaccine that is not worth taking if you are a Westerner traveling into a place that has cholera, both because the efficacy of the cholera vaccine is known to be very low, and as a Westerner traveling, even in very remote places, you are very likely to have access to clean water, which is your best way to stay clear of cholera or to clear it from your system.
Yep.
Yeah.
But increasingly, I am alarmed by anything that uses killed virus or fractions of a killed virus because of the need for adjuvants. Right. So although the killed virus in principle might be in one way safer than an attenuated virus because the killed virus can't evolve, it is...
Killed virus vaccines are less likely to infect you with the thing you're trying to get inoculated against.
Well, killed virus vaccines can't really infect you.
Right. That counts as less.
It's a lot less.
Yes.
But the point is, the body doesn't necessarily react to them the way it needs to in order to scale up the immunity because it doesn't read them as a real infection. So it is more likely to garbage collect them than to react to them in a way that creates adaptive immunity. So to beat that, they've introduced these things that annoy the immune system and make it seem sick so that it reacts as if it's infected, right? They create the artificial impression of something being wrong, and they introduce this antigen, and the two of those things come together and they generate a reaction. But who knows what else they generate a reaction to? Who knows how much autoimmunity, who knows how much food allergy or environmental allergy might be caused by that. So for my money, I'd say attenuated vaccines are, despite the scary possibility, I mean, they do actually infect us. That's how they work. And
there's obviously a risk. There's a risk with every single thing you put in your body.
Well, there's a risk, and there's also probably a cost. And I am not convinced that we know how big those costs are, that we measure them well. In fact, the more we learn about how work is done to see whether something is worth the hazard, the more I'm convinced that we don't have a system capable of even giving us good information.
In this case, what is the distinction you're making between risk and cost for the live attenuated vaccines?
The risk is something that might happen to you, right? Like some pathology that might emerge. The cost might be, if you're going to have an attenuated virus vaccine, it's going to infect a certain number of cells. Presumably those cells are ultimately destroyed by the immune system. The immune system learns the formula in the process of destroying and discovering the antigens. You've lost some cells. Hopefully they're cells you can afford to lose, right? If they're in a tissue that you're not going to die of the failure of that tissue, then it could very well be worth it. If the disease itself isn't very serious, maybe it's not worth it.
So 100% of the time there is some cost.
Right.
And the vast majority of the time, with effective, successful live attenuated vaccines, that cost is relatively minor and the benefit far outweighs the cost.
Right. It would be hoped. The problem is, because the people doing the testing are obviously the people with a perverse incentive over discovering that, well, wouldn't you know it, these things are safe and hey, they're terrifically effective, or no, terrifically efficacious. And we should actually get back to that distinction. But in any case, the initial vaccine, right, Jenner's discovery of the vaccine is effectively live attenuated, right? Because what he used was, or what he found was that cowpox had cross reactivity with smallpox.
Yeah, no, it's actually perfect. So live attenuated to me sounds like something's been done to it to make it a little bit less virulent, but it's the same human pathogen. But if you've got a sister pathogen whose host is heterospecific, that is to say, different species than humans, that also has cross-infectivity. That's perfect.
Right, and in fact, basically what he noticed,
as the poxes do,
was that the milkmaids weren't getting smallpox because they were all downstream of cowpox, right? And so it was attenuated by nature, and that led to the discovery and all of that, and it's a very elegant mechanism. What to do with all the, I do have a concern. J.J. Couey's point, and I'm increasingly convinced that although I dismissed the linguistic distinction before, I think this is an error that I made. The transfection question is a serious one, right? This is to call this a vaccine smuggles it in a category that feels safer than it is, actually, but it's way safer than some untested technology that does involve, instead of producing the vaccine in a factory, turning you into a vaccine factory, right? That's what it does. And
so the linguistic smuggling, it almost seems like even if we weren't actively set up, we were effectively actively set up for many, many years by understanding, everyone in polite society is like, oh, we know that the anti-vaxxers is just a different group, right? And so what that creates is an understanding that I believe the vast majority of us before COVID would have said, yes, pro-vaccine, but would I accept anything called a vaccine if what it actually was an experimental medical treatment that didn't have the data behind it that we were being told, and whose creators had perverse financial incentives that went deeper than we can ever imagine? Most people would have said, well, just because you put that label on it doesn't mean that I'm going to take it. Right. And so this one word, and there are a few of these, but the word vaccine has such cachet, for people that it has been that, even now, we've got the governor of the state of Washington, the Prime Minister of Canada saying, actually, no, all y'alls need to be vaccinated and boosted and all of this, even in the face of increasingly overwhelming evidence that these are not the vaccines you were told they were.
Right. These aren't vaccines at all. Right. They're transfections. I don't know, but I don't see any reason why the flu vaccine isn't a vaccine. I think it's just a lousy one. So maybe there's something I don't know about it, but I think it is a vaccine by the mechanistic definition. It's just not effective enough to be worthwhile and has costs that we don't acknowledge. So I have one other point. It had to do with the DNA transfection mechanism, but I can't remember what it was. Anyway, nonetheless, there is something to the idea that were you to say, oh, James is anti-pharmaceutical, he's anti-pill, right? That wouldn't make any sense, because presumably James, whatever his conditions might be, should be anti just about every pill and only accept those for which there's evidence that it would be more beneficial to him than costly, right? And in fact, we recognize in the case of every single pharmaceutical pill that there is toxicity to it. And so built into the model is there's a cost, and it needs to exceed that cost in your particular case.
Well, and anti-pharmaceutical could be perhaps more accurately for most of us described as the default position is no thank you. I need to be convinced that this is going to be valuable for me, that the net benefit outweighs the costs, that there is net benefit rather. And that position, which is an extraordinarily reasonable and middle-of-the-road position, has been denounced as anti-scientific, as right-wing, as bad for public health, as therefore anti-community spirited, and it is none of these things, Elmo and his father notwithstanding.
Right. Now this reminds me of what I was going to say. There is a hallmark. In fact, I think there are several hallmarks of corruption. how much of what we think is true about X, Y, or Z vaccine or transfection agent is the result of a corrupt system. Mm-hmm. One of the hallmarks of it is going to be the gap between efficaciousness and effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, the distinction between these things, as you know, is that efficacy is under scientific conditions. It's basically in the lab, right?
Or during the trials.
Right. Mm-hmm. And effectiveness is empirically in the world. How well does it work? So if you
after the trials have ended, if it's been stamped by the FDA or whomever, and now it's just out being used by Gen Pop, by the general population, then we are talking effectiveness.
Right. Yeah. So there are reasons for these two numbers not to be the same, right? For example, the difficulty of, if a protocol is very effective against a disease, but it's very difficult for a person to follow, you may find people not following it very well, and so the effectiveness will be lower. Yep. On the other hand, that doesn't apply to something like these transfection agents.
Nope.
Right? The point is, it gets administered under the eyes of an expert, by an expert, and it has its effect or it doesn't. And that's not...
Well, I mean, actually, there is actually one thing that we know of.
Aspiration.
Wherein presumably, although who knows, but in the trials, you had people giving the shots who actually had been trained for the 5 minutes they needed to be trained in how to actually give a shot, which included aspiration.
Well, that'd be fascinating if they had been trained to do it.
And then there is now ample anecdotal evidence that some number of people who now be downstream of vaccine injuries, COVID vaccine injuries, had people delivering the shots who did not know to, is it aspirate the needle? I'm not actually sure the grammatical way to say it.
Aspirate the syringe.
Yeah.
So the reason that this matters is because in general, if you put the needle in an arbitrary distance, you don't hit a blood vessel. And so whatever you're injecting goes into the lymph space, essentially. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it has time to infect, if it's a vaccine, it has time to infect the cells right there, so it doesn't just float around the body and infect cells randomly. And frankly, making your arm sick is better than making your lungs sick, for example.
Right.
So it matters a lot. So if they trained people in the trials to do this correctly, so the idea is if you happen to hit a blood vessel and you inject the thing, so the thing is circulating now in your blood rather than in the interstitial space, that's a hazard because it's not by design. So
you want this to be localized.
Right. So if they trained people, if they understood that this needed to be done correctly in the trial in order to reduce the number of adverse events.
In order for it to actually be an effective treatment, right? Efficacious treatment.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. There's another weird phenomenon here is that you're talking about a respiratory virus and you're talking about the injection in the arm. And so there's a question about whether that made sense in the first place.
Right.
But nonetheless.
Spritz up the nose might have been a more effective vaccine.
Yeah. We didn't have that vaccine. Yeah. But in any case, if you've hit a blood vessel and you inject it, that's bad. Teaching people to figure out whether they've hit a blood vessel before they inject the stuff is not difficult. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it was not done and is apparently still not being done is insane. Mm-hmm. So that was a very important potential difference here. But in any case, what I wanted to get at is if pharma games its own trials to make things look much more efficacious than they are and much less hazardous than they are, then what that will look like is a giant gap between what was reported from the trials and what we see out in the wild. And of course, getting rid of the control group more generally by vaccinating everybody is one way to prevent that from happening. But what we are seeing, I mean, if you
unblinding
the trial, so the actual control group ceases to be, and then trying to vaccinate everybody, irrespective of whether or not an age stratification makes any argument whatsoever for vaccinating some of them, is another good way. And so what is all of this? Well, one hallmark of it being about corruption is, they told me this thing was 90+% efficacious, and its effectiveness is garbage. Now they're telling me I need one every 9 months. Right? They're telling me I need one every 9 months and it doesn't prevent transmission or contraction of the virus. So what is that gap between, these things are stellar and it's garbage, you're going to need one all the time, right? That's a measure of corruption, as is the double standard between the various metrics that these new agents are exposed to versus existing agents that are repurposed. And we should come back to that another day. But the double standard is one hallmark of corruption, and a vast gap between efficaciousness and effectiveness, right? These two technically different things is going to be another one.
Indeed. All right. I think we're done with that for today.
Yes.
You wanted to say a little bit about Jordan Peterson and the actor Ellen, I think, Elliott page.
Yes.
And how Jordan Peterson got kicked off Twitter. Right.
So I will say we're catching up to this story probably much later than most people in our audience. You and I were in transit, and I think yesterday finally saw the video that Jordan had put out where he responds to apparently being suspended from Twitter, but suspended with the agreement that he would have to delete his tweet about Ellen/Elliott page in order to be welcomed back. And Jordan said something for which he was mocked by many people, which is that he'd rather die than delete the tweet. Now, I don't think anybody who has been less predictive than Jordan Peterson about the catastrophe of these linguistic games and their implication for a wider kind of failure is in any position to criticize him for saying that, because I know what he's saying. He's not saying, I'd rather die than delete a tweet. What he's saying is, I know what that implies, right? Mm-hmm. This is a hill I've long seen. Most of you could not see this hill. Mocked me years ago when I was on this hill. Right. And I mean, this is metaphorically, this is the hill that I'll die on, is what he's saying. Well, and he's saying it having correctly, he was mocked before for saying, hey, Bill C-19 is compelled speech, right? I won't do it. I asked him personally the first time I met him. I said, look, I got a lot of trans students. I call them what they asked me to call them, which, by the way, was never they, right? It was never zer. It was always he or she, right? And he said, oh, I'll call what they asked me to, as so long as they are making an attempt to present that way, right? He's not an unreasonable guy. He's just saying you can't. Nor is he mean. You can't force me. Yeah. You can't force me to say stuff, right? And forcing me to say stuff is actually one step down the road, down an authoritarian path that is actually well understood. And so anyway, what he's saying is, look, I, Jordan Peterson, am not going to participate in that because I know what it is. As trivial as the example may seem, I know what it is, and I'm not going to be part of that thing, which I have to say I respect and admire, even if I might make a different choice in his shoes, right? Because the reason he didn't want to delete it, according to the video, is that the way Twitter does not explain what it is that he's done that violates the rules, and he goes through a taxonomy of what it might be. All of it is absurd, but there are various things. But what he says is, Twitter says you will delete the tweet, and by doing so, acknowledge that you violated the rule against harassment or threatening or whatever it might have been. Yeah. When in fact, what he has done is he is effectively dead named, which is, you might notice, not illegal, right? It's not even obvious that it is in and of itself it's a made up crime, right? And I would point out, you and I have actually covered this very issue on this podcast. I don't remember exactly when it was. Maybe we can figure it out. But we talked about the fact that Bradley Manning is now reported by his Wikipedia page, and I checked before the podcast, it's still true. Bradley Manning has been transmuted into Chelsea Manning, and that has been imposed on the piece of history in which he conveyed classified documents to WikiLeaks. Right. And the point is, it says Chelsea Manning did it. Which is absurd, but it's even more obviously absurd when you take Bruce/Caitlyn Jenner. Right. Caitlyn Jenner was not an Olympic award-winning athlete in whenever that was. Decathlon winner in the men's division. It was not. Right. And it's not
that sport is the most important thing that we are fighting for. It is that sport is so obvious. It is so obvious in sport that men who transition to calling themselves women and presenting as women will never be, cannot be women. And if they went through puberty as men, as boys into men, they will always have male characteristics that do not change no matter what their circulating androgen levels change to, no matter what. So Caitlyn Jenner is not an Olympic award-winning athlete. Bruce Jenner is. Those two personas exist in the same body, right? When Caitlyn Jenner dies, Bruce Jenner dies. And the idea that by saying Bruce Jenner, you are dead naming, really? Bruce Jenner is dead? There's one human being, and they have changed persona, and they have changed the way they present to the world, but it is one human being.
Yeah, and so a couple things. One, this is clearly true. In both of the cases that you and I are talking about, not only are we talking about a matter of public record, we are talking about the ability to describe historical facts.
Right.
You cannot get in the road of people describing. It's not disrespectful to say Bradley Manning conveyed classified documents to WikiLeaks, was incarcerated, right, and then transitioned under incarceration, right? There's nothing disrespectful about that. It's just a simple description of facts. And the idea that dead naming is part of it, a simple description of facts, no, this is beyond Orwellian, right? Or maybe it's not. It's hard to get beyond Orwell, but it's pretty solidly Orwellian to tell people, oh, no, you can't describe things that are just simply true and matters of record.
Yeah.
And I would point out, Wikipedia reports this wrongly. The New York Times reported it wrongly in the Bradley Manning case. Rolling Stone does the same thing. The point is we are accepting this change in the rules that obviously is incompatible with a functional society without ever having discussed what the costs and benefits of that change are. And that is alarming. Now, I tweeted something right before our stream. I just simply described Bradley Manning's conviction, incarceration, etc. I just described it factually. Now, my guess is Twitter's not going to do anything about it, right? Did I dead name Chelsea Manning by mentioning that Bradley Manning existed and was a he? No, and I doubt Chelsea Manning would say so. But the point is, all of this, and Jordan makes this point in his video very clearly, the whole point of this is the arbitrary application of the rules. It's not about the rules. The point is we want the right to get rid of those that we deem trouble, right? And so the point is the arbitrary application is the point, right? And maybe they'll come after me. And
it's like a low posted speed limit in a town.
It's exactly it.
Where most people who drive above the speed limit never get stopped, but almost anyone is at risk of getting stopped because almost everyone is going what the speed limit should be. And therefore, when you do get pulled over, if you happen to be, black or Arab or, whatever it is in that town,
Jewish,
in that place,
hippie, gay,
right,
whatever it is,
the police have cover. And, this is maybe a somewhat dated example at this point, but low posted speed limit rules are used to used so that the authorities can selectively apply them. And in this case, the authorities is the woke mob.
Right. Exactly. Now the question is, this doesn't show up, right? The beauty of selective enforcement from the point of view of authoritarians who, aspire to being petty dictators, is that they are left with discretion. The vagueness of the rules is part of that. The fact that you aren't told what it is, Jordan, it's a tweet. It's not very long, but there are 3 potential places in there that they might have flagged him, and they don't say which it is. So he doesn't say which of them he's acknowledging if he deletes the thing, right? So it's vague to begin with. You're not given information, and there's no venue where you could go and say, our friend Dr. Rollergator is still suspended from Twitter for facetiously invoking the idea of a slap with a glove, which is in itself symbolic, as we talked about on our last stream. So that, the point is some people are going to be exposed to this, others will not. That's a feature, not a bug. That's the point of the system, is to be able to arbitrarily wield power where you want and to immunize those that you don't want to do this to, which is a mechanism of control. And it's very serious that it gets in our venue for discussing important issues, unfortunately, which is, of course, what Elon Musk was animated by in his pursuit of Twitter to liberate it.
You speak in the past tense.
Well, as far as I know, it's on hold. I hope he revives it, and I hope that the episode with Jordan Peterson functions like the Leah Thomas episode in Swimming did, where it's so obviously insane that the point is scales will fall from many eyes over it. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say, though, is Jordan, in his beautifully lit video.
Beautifully lit?
Yes. It's marvelously lit.
Literally?
Yes. It's very well done. Production values are...
You're not talking metaphorically lit.
Oh, it's on fire, but it's also beautifully lit. Okay. Anyway, he ends up in the trap that we also have talked about here, where he is forced to explain why something that's obviously nonsense and dangerous is nonsense, right? And so he finds himself at length in this chair trying to make it clear enough that everyone will understand exactly what absurd thing has taken place. And I still believe, and I do not know the mechanism, but I still believe those of us who see this for what it is have to figure out how to free ourselves from the obligation of answering the sophists, right? The fact is, history happens. It's messy. People may harbor mean intent that you cannot prove. You cannot go around prosecuting because you think you can detect somebody's mean intent in a particular tweet. That's not how it works, right? And so anyway, somehow we have to free ourselves from the obligation to respond. And in Jordan's case, I don't think he had a choice, but it is interesting. You can see if you just watch the thing and you listen to him working hard to explain in a way that it's clear enough and that he doesn't trip over any of the tripwires that have been arrayed around the place. It's pretty clear what's taking place.
Nice. All right. The last thing that I wanted to talk about briefly here before we sign off for the week was prompted by, I am much of the way through, but not yet done with listening to a novel that I'm finding quite extraordinary. It's called The Only Woman in the Room by Marie Benedict. That's a pen name. And it's a fictionalized history. It's historical fiction about Hedy Lamarr, who was an extraordinary woman. And let's just go to this example first by way of introducing the idea that sort of expanded from this. In it, in the book, and I assume that this is more or less accurate. I have not gone and sort of checked it against biographies of Hedy Lamarr. She's got this awful husband. She's got this Austrian munitions dealer whom she is married to as a young, gorgeous actress, but she can't be an actress anymore when she's married to him because he says no. And her Jewish parents, who find her interested in this guy, not completely reviled by him at first, say it might be protective, given how much he wants you. It might be protective for you to marry him because Hitler's right over the border. And he, this munitions dealer who becomes her husband, is interested in independent Austria, in keeping Austria independent of Germany. Well, we all know how that ends up. And the husband, of course, becomes more and more controlling as men of a certain personality type, and as men, powerful men, historically often have been, of the women in their lives. And so she's got, she's incredibly wealthy and she's stunningly gorgeous and also incredibly brilliant. But she's got, gowns and jewelry and all the best food, and she has, all of the amenities, but she's not allowed to go out by herself. And she's not allowed to pursue the science that actually her father has taught her and that she's very interested in, or her acting, which is what she had begun to do and was excellent at. And so she says, the Lamarr character in the book, The Only Woman in the Room, she says, "I wanted for nothing but liberty and purpose." And that struck me as exactly right. That many people's ideas of what they would give to people in their care is a life of leisure. Some of the ideas of heaven are ones in which there's nothing to be done but sit around idly and eat bonbons that are brought to you. And in fact, it's telling, I think, that in most of those cases, the people who themselves are imagining that they are trying to create a life like that for others do not want it for themselves. They know that. So this is often seen with powerful men enacting control over women. It's seen with many kinds of parents, especially modern helicopter parents, enacting control, which looks like love and protection over their children, but in fact, children also, not babies. There's obviously a gradient from complete helplessness to complete unhelplessness, but you don't learn how to be helpful and useful and do work in the world and find value from your own, productivity or service or creativity or discovery or whatever it is that you are going to do to make meaning in the world. You won't discover if you are simply protected from all things that are useful. And many parents are doing that now with their children. And also, and this is a little farther afield, but many people who think of themselves as communists or communist adjacent imagine a utopia in which, yes, everyone has to do some kind of work, but the work you do kind of doesn't even necessarily have to match to what you're interested in or what you're best at. There's a certain amount of low-level work that needs to get done, and that will free us all to what? To like this leisure that what people aren't recognizing is leisure when earned is fantastic, and we can all look forward to it, and it is exactly what we can use as a reward as we're working through the parts of our work that isn't that rewarding. But if it's just leisure all the time, it quickly becomes its own kind of prison. And I think the thing that is missing, either intentionally or not, from all of these sorts of examples of people who want to protect others from work, is that meaning is found in work. There's like for much of us, the meaning of life is actually found in struggling through figuring out what problems need to be solved, through discovery, through exploration, through creativity, through healing, through service to others, through protecting others, through a number teaching. Like there are all sorts of leadership. There are all sorts of verbs that you can invoke here by which you might actually find meaning, but they all involve work. And being protected from any of that is actually going to produce quite the opposite. And then you will enrage those people who have effectively captured you, because they will say you're being ungrateful. How dare you not appreciate all I've done to protect you from ever having to work? Well, no, actually, there is value in work.
This is an error that I think comes from the path dependency of evolution having been discovered late in the history of people. And the reason is that
that's interesting.
You have cost, the amount of energy you have to spend to do something, the amount of time that you have to spend to do it, the amount of suffering that is involved in doing it. And you have reward, which is internally generated, right? Which is, I have that sense of accomplishment, or I've earned this time off and I'm going to savor it, whatever it is, right? And so if you are only paying attention somatically and you notice, the glorious thing is what comes after the suffering and all of the investment. And wouldn't it be glorious if, first of all, we do try to minimize, as we should, the amount of suffering and investment to get to a given level of reward, right? I used to tell our students that work was a necessary evil. Now, I did not mean that it is in any way desirable to not work hard, but the basic point is if you have two people who have to work a different amount to reach the same level of productivity, you want the one who worked less to produce the same amount of value. Not because that makes you not because we're trying to get to a leisurely state where no work is involved, but because it means that you actually have room to do something else that generates more value. And hopefully, this is why I rant and rave to, I think, nobody's delight about the problem of the idea of recreation. right? That fun is something you are supposed to have in the process of accomplishing something, right? And that when you start thinking that fun is the whole point, rather than fun is the reward to get you to be active and do something, you invert the system. And what we find out is exactly what you're pointing out, which is that people who have a life that looks like this often are not, wonderful people. They're spoiled brats.
Yeah. Or satisfied with their own lives.
Right. It doesn't satisfy you. Actually, it leaves you rudderless.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how we cure people of their understandable but very wrong instinct about what they think they want, right? But it's important that we do because, we've also talked about the fact that what happened to us that tossed us out of a set of careers in which we knew what we were supposed to do every day, right? That was a violent upheaval. But it did fill life with purpose. And it's not that the life that we had before hadn't any purpose. It had a ton of it. But the point is, figuring out how to navigate in the world did create many interesting puzzles. And obviously, the ability to have an impact, as people were paying attention to what we thought about various things, it created a lot of meaning. And I think, if you pursued meaning that was substantial to you, then you would find that all the things that you think you want without having to work for them are downstream of it. They would have to be, because for them to be valuable to you, you already have the circuit that will release those rewards at the point that you accomplish whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's very well said. I think people who are pursuing that thing, retire before 30, become a millionaire before 30, or whatever the current number should be to make that make sense economically. It's begging for a kind of infantilized life and for being unmoored. And, some number of people will be able to, having effectively, and I don't like this language because I don't like the idea that our time doesn't belong to us and we have to buy it back. But that's very, very, very backwards. And it sort of emerges with the Industrial Revolution, that whole concept that we are, that our labor is not ours to begin with, and our time is not ours to begin with. But certainly in the modern economy, having a certain amount of money allows you to have access to your time, which should have been yours to begin with. But of course, many people get their time back not by doing that, but by making different choices around what kinds of things they are going to be willing to never have access to. Not participate in the market economy in quite the same way, but have a tremendous amount of freedom in terms of who they are beholden to and how they can move around the world and how they're able to spend their time.
Yeah, there's a strange kind of communism in the idea that your time doesn't belong to you and you're going to have to buy it back, right? Because the idea is, well, no, you're working for the collective, you're working for the economy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's nonsense. Now, I did used to tell students, don't be shy about earning money and buying back your time. Now, of course, my point to them was not so that you can squander it on video games. My point was, you want as much of your time as possible so you can do with it something you value, right? There's something dehumanizing about doing labor, the product of which you care nothing about, right? If you're filing somebody else's papers, if you're flipping burgers that you didn't, it's not that you've got a recipe for burgers, you're stuck in some job, the consequence of which is not important to you, that's in its own way a mini tragedy. And to the extent that you can recover your time and go do carpentry or art or, think deep thoughts and convey them or whatever it is that you find value in, you should do that. Because as you started with, the purpose in life is what actually derives the sort of deep sense of satisfaction. And if you look at what's happened to virtually everything, we talk in the book about the junkification of everything, right? Junk relationships, junk sex, junk media. Food, junk media, all that stuff. The point is, it's really about a very superficial thing that just gives you a little little charge every now and again, rather than something, deeply investing in something and accomplishing it after a couple of years and feeling months of joy at finally having produced whatever it was.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's out there, but it requires freeing yourselves from what the economy will do to you enough to be able to do what you want to do. Anyway, if I could wish something for everybody, it's that they would have enough, whatever it is. I hate to focus on money, but enough resource and flexibility to generate that room to do something, and then that you would do it.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, I think we've arrived.
I believe so.
I believe we've arrived.
Still Wednesday.
It is still Wednesday. It is going to be Wednesday for a little while longer here on the West Coast of the United States. We are not going to do a Q&A this week, but when we return to you in a week and a half on Saturday the 16th, I believe, we will have a Q&A then. In the meantime, we encourage you to go visit our new store, darkhorsestore.org. Pick up some Pfizer merch, some YouTube merch, Tour de France, other things there. And, check out all the things. Subscribe to the stations, the channels. Like the video if you in fact liked it. Share it. Comment, I guess. That helps the algorithm, I hear, although it's hard
like the video and then like the video. We want them to like the video.
Yes.
And then if they like the video in the modern sense of that term, that would be great too.
Yes, it would be. And share it. And we thank you for all of the support that we hear from you, and hope that if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, your summer days are going beautifully. So, be good to the ones you love, eat good food, and get outside.
Be well, everyone.